Hey everybody, we're going to try something new today. Um, I've been wanting to kind of do this for a while, but I'm going to go through every Final Fantasy that I've played and put it into a tier list. I've gone through, made sure that these are all ones that I've played for a decent amount of time. So there's some on here that I have played. I mean, some of these are on here I haven't played all the way to completion, but I've played a good chunk. And I left some off where I've played only like a few minutes here and there. Like Final Fantasy Explorers, I've played for just a minuscule amount, so I don't feel comfortable really judging it. So there might be some Final Fantasy games that aren't on here that you might expect to be on here. For instance, none of the Crystal Chronicle games are on here, but I never got a chance to really play them. But we're going to go through, and let's start first with Final Fantasy I. I actually remember playing Final Fantasy I on the original Nintendo at my grandparents' house, all the way from beginning to end. And it took me forever because I didn't know what I was doing half the time, because I was just a little kid, and that game is so much just exploring, really not knowing what you're supposed to do, finally stumbling upon a dungeon, finding an item, taking it to 2 towns back, getting another item, and then going back and forth between 3 or 4 different towns to get there. But it had me hooked like immediately. The whole battle system and grinding out levels, building up characters, and seeing all those iconic job classes and where it started was really great. The only place where it really falls apart is the story is really basic, and then a convoluted time loop story is thrown in there as well. So I'm gonna probably put this, I think I'm gonna put it at a B. I might lower that later, but it was a really good starting point. It really hooked me in, and really caught my attention, and it's what got me into RPGs originally. Alright, moving on to Final Fantasy II. I actually remember emulating Final Fantasy II with like an English patch when I was like a teenager, just getting a hold of the internet for kind of the first time. And it was really intriguing because it was totally different than Final Fantasy I. You didn't gain levels, which is the thing that to this day is kind of its black eye. The story, everybody tends to agree that it's got a pretty good story, especially for an NES title. But that battle system, which was the same as 1, but they tweaked that leveling to where it's more of a saga system, where you had to get hit to gain HP, to gain defense. You had to use a certain weapon to level up that weapon. You had to use magic to level up the magic. And ultimately, it just was really hard to understand at the time. I understand that the PSP remake has made that a lot better. I think I remember playing it again on the PlayStation release, and that's what I remember more than anything. But I think this is tough to say because the story is good, but that battle system was really bad. I don't want to end up with just everything in B. I really want to put it there. I'm going to go ahead and put it in C. If that battle system was able to catch your attention more, it would be a ton better. Alright, now Final Fantasy III. This is another one I emulated a little bit as a kid. I think the first time I beat it was actually on emulation. And going through the final dungeon where there is no save points, because none of these Nintendo Entertainment System Final Fantasy had save points. You had to go back to town and save, or I can't remember if this started letting you save on the world map. But you had to go through this long final dungeon, which included like a town that you could visit, or technically just like a shop. Going through beating all these super hard bosses to get to the Cloud of Darkness, finally beat the game. And then there's these dungeons throughout the game. Let me just come back and this game started the job system as we kind of know it today. Final Fantasy I had it a little bit, but 3 was actually the class system where you could change jobs throughout the game, use abilities. That led to some creative things where you had to have certain jobs for certain parts of the game to actually complete bosses or complete puzzles. It was really experimental. Loved that about it. The 3D remake is just okay. It's a lot more playable than the original is. It's the one of the pixel remasters that are coming out that I'm most excited to play. But story is super basic, and there's still a lot of jank there, so it's gotta be a C as well. I'm sure that might hurt some people. I'm partial to the characters in the 3D remake, so I'm disappointed that the pixel remaster is doing away with them. But now we can really start getting into some of the great Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy IV, which I just played on my channel, I believe all those videos are up now, was such a step up when I was a kid because I just came off the original Final Fantasy and moved on to the Super Nintendo Final Fantasies, and like the storytelling was 10 to 100 times better. You start off with like this really cool Dark Knight character and a dragoon. The first time in America we're seeing dragoons, who has this ability to jump up and just spear enemies. It catches your attention right off the bat. Pacing wise, it's actually really well paced until you get to the moon and there's a huge difficulty spike for you. And there's a few really bad dungeons, including the final dungeon. But you've got the Lodestone Cavern where you can't use metal weapons. You've got the dark crystal sealed cave where every door is a trapdoor and a really difficult enemy. But I've got to give it an A because the storytelling is on point. The characters are ones I still remember to this day, and are just iconic ones. Kain, Highwind, Cecil as a paladin, you've got Riddy as a summoner. Edge, the first like real like ninja a lot of people got to see, and really unique from the standpoint of ninja. But yeah, it's a solid top tier Final Fantasy, but not up to that god tier. We're gonna get near that here in a second. Final Fantasy V. Another one that might have emulated, but I definitely remember playing it on the PlayStation. It also uses the job class system from Final Fantasy III. This one, a lot of people love now, mainly because of the way you can kind of exploit the job system or challenge yourself by limiting the number of jobs you can use per character. That's the 4-job fiesta is usually what everybody refers to that as, because they do a fundraiser every summer where you only get 4 jobs to play, and you've got to beat the game with those 4 jobs. The storyline is much improved from 3, but is a step down from 4. Because of that job system enhancement and the introduction of a few new iconic classes and, of course, Gilgamesh. Technically Omega. I've got to bump this one up. This is going to be a B. Now, I'm just going to go and do this. It's going to be God tier. Final Fantasy VI is God tier. It is my favorite Final Fantasy. It's the one that like I begged my grandma to buy me. My brother and I played through this, restarted it so many times because we rented it so much before we got somebody to buy it for us. So I know that that World of Balance like the back of my glove, or like the back of my hand. The characters are all great. Even some of the ones that some people don't like Strago and Realm, that come in really late in the World of Balance, still really hold a place in my heart. The battle system was much improved, I think. I think the active time battle system really came into its own here. And it's the first time they really pushed, from a character growth standpoint, being able to do what you want, through the Esper system of being able to decide what kind of stat upgrades you wanted on level up, giving everybody all magic. And that was just really fun. And then they added, for airship travel, they now have parallax scrolling, that makes just a completely unique feel to flying at the time. And then it also did not have a main character. I've seen some people argue that the game actually has two different main characters depending on what part of the story you're in. For the World of Balance, you've got Terra as your main character, really trying to figure out where her place in the world is, and then in the World of Ruin, you've got Celis as your main character, trying to pick up the pieces and regain these connections with all your party members. And then probably the best villain in the entire series in Kefka, and some of the best music in the series as well. I don't know. I love this game. I've got a playthrough of the Brave New World mod on my channel. You should check that out if you've never played that mod. It's so much more difficult, but a lot more rewarding as you figure things out. I want to tell one story about Final Fantasy VI. This is something my brother and I decided to do, and it's crazy. We had a Game Genie, and Nintendo had like a few codes out where I think one of the lines was that you could choose like what weapons or armor Terra started to equip the game with. And my brother and I figured out which numbers you could change in that line of code to affect which slot on Terra's character and what the item is. And we went through and cataloged every possible code using that. And so we then did a playthrough where we all had, I think it's the Aegis shield in that. It's the one that absorbs all magic. And also, if I remember, it teaches you Meteo as well. And so we just spend the game spamming Meteo with every one of our characters and just burning through enemies. And it was a really fun playthrough. Now, on to Final Fantasy VII, which is, I think, a lot of people's favorite Final Fantasy. The one a lot of people started with because it came out on the PlayStation and was super hyped up. I remember this is the first game I actually mowed lawns to be able to make my own money to purchase myself. The characters are still super iconic. There's a reason that people clamored for the remake. The battle system just was continuing to be refined. We now have the materia system, which was somewhat similar to Magicite, but you had to tie it into what pieces of armor you equipped. You could attach certain materia that connected together to change what they did, whether it add an elemental damage to your attacks or auto-used a certain spell or item in certain instances. A really iconic villain in Sephiroth. It's gonna be another god tier. I think there's only gonna be probably 4 that make that god tier point, but these two right in a row, Square Enix was nailing it out of the park. Yes, technically it's Squaresoft. Jumping onto the remake. Remake I gotta put it in A because I don't think there's some really weird decisions they made in the storytelling department, primarily in stuff that seems to be about time travel or defying fate and some stuff like that that just does not work for me. But I think that the battle system is almost near perfect for making a combined action and traditional Final Fantasy turn-based battle system meld together. And I think the characterization of all the characters was so perfect, and the designs were so faithful, but updated at the same time, that it's amazing that they were able to pull that off. And so I can't give it anything less than an A because of that. Really am interested to see where they go next. It seems like we know how the next one's going to start, which is probably with the Nibelheim flashback, with you playing as Cloud, Sephiroth alongside you, just to kind of do that tutorial system for you before you jump back into the game and moving forward. But I'm definitely excited for that. Now, starting to get some of the ones that I didn't beat and also didn't play as much, mainly because kind of where I was in my life at the time. This was high school and starting to not have as much time to play through games. Also, my brother was spending a lot more time with the PlayStation more than I was. But Final Fantasy VIII, this is going to hurt some people's feelings, but it's going to go into B. The characters are, to me, just okay. I don't have a connection to any of them. That's the biggest problem for me. And sometimes they're a little bit too childish for kind of where they are in the story. And then the storytelling just wasn't as cohesive as the games that came before it. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't seem to work, and it just confuses you. And after listening to Resonant Arc's podcast that goes through the entire game, I have a lot of appreciation for what they were trying to do, but it definitely feels like this is the one that Sakaguchi let somebody else kind of take a shot, and it feels like a miss. I wasn't a fan of the draw system or the GF junctioning system. It broke the game and was confusing at the same time. So yeah, it's gonna be in a B. On to Final Fantasy IX. This is one that I have not beaten myself. I've watched my brother beat it. It's a good game. I like the characters okay. I have to give it an A because of one reason, and that is its way that you learn abilities and spells. Which, if you don't know, it's from using certain armor or weapons, and then you slowly gain AP and learn them on your character. The reason that's important to me is probably back when Final Fantasy VI released, I tried designing my own role-playing game, and that was the system I had designed for learning magic in my role-playing game that I was wanting to make. And so seeing another game actually use it, and it worked really well, just made me feel really good about what I was wanting to do. So it gets bonus points for that. Also, the feel of going back to the classic Final Fantasies, for me at this time, largely Final Fantasy I, and seeing like black mages and white mages was heartwarming when we had gone from 6, 7, and 8, which had a lot more steampunk to modern to futuristic like feeling. To go back to this classic fantasy feeling was like coming home. Where it kind of falls apart, I don't think I liked Kuja as a villain. I plan to replay it at some point. It probably will go up on the channel when I do. Probably do it for a JRPG July. But I didn't like Kuja, and I know that there's another big bad that shows up near the end, which is a throwback, but not a throwback, and not entirely interesting. But Final Fantasy IX feels like home, and so I can't put it less than an A. Final Fantasy X. 10 is a hard one, because I played through most of it when it first released. And remember enjoying it, and then I got to a point and just dropped it for some reason. And I went back and played it a few years ago and really enjoyed it. The sphere grid is going back to being able to make all your characters kind of the same if you really work at it, but more than anything, it's still at the same time steered you down the same paths. The summoning system was a great upgrade where you're actually now controlling the summons in battle. Going back to a true turn-based and not active turn-based was really fun because it was a lot more strategic, it felt like, and you weren't just rushing to choose your commands to get ahead of the enemy. And then every character really having a role outside of Kelmari was really nice as well. Wasn't a fan of Seymour, and then you get to Sin at the end of the game, and there's not really much there as well. And the official pronunciation of Titus is wrong, so it gets negative points there as well. God, I don't want to put it B because I like it a lot better than Final Fantasy VIII. I don't feel it's A material as well. So it's going to have to go in B. There's really not a choice. Final Fantasy X-2. This is one I haven't beat. I kind of enjoyed that it goes back to like a job system again. But I don't like the storytelling in it. I'm going to put it in C. Primarily because it uses like a mission-based system, and you've got to like visit all these different places to knock out certain just points where you have to talk to people so that it opens something out in another area. I just felt lost for most of it that I played. So, I mean, like I said, I haven't played it all the way through, so I might not be able to really say how great it is or not. But I'm throwing it in C from my experience. Final Fantasy XI is not a great game, but I spent so much time playing it. And some of those experiences I had were great. I met a lot of great people. A lot of people I interact with today is because of a forum that I discovered to talk about stuff about Final Fantasy XI. But the story is hard to get into because of the way they structure it. Having to get to certain levels and then finding people that will go do these old fights with you so you can get through the story. And that's just the base story. The expansions were just as bad. And then the battle system was really slow when I look back at it. But it was fun because it allowed you enough time that you could, with a keyboard, chat with people while you were actually leveling or fighting huge NMs that you had to kill for gear drops. But yeah, looking back, while it was a great experience, it wasn't a great game. And so I've got to kind of put it in B. Final Fantasy XII. The first Final Fantasy where you were really doing 3D combat. Well, first single player game where you're doing 3D combat, not entering instance battles, and technically kind of a spin-off of a spin-off, because it was set in the world of Final Fantasy Tactics. Um, but it also, how do I want to say it? It had the political intrigue of Final Fantasy Tactics, but to 1,000. Like, it was pure political drama for most of it. And some really interesting characters. I love those political nature games. It's part of the stuff that I like about the Suikoden series. The battle system's interesting because you could technically treat it like a turn-based RPG if you wanted to, but it was a lot more efficient if you set up what was the gambit system in this, where you could tell your characters, if this happens, then do this. Some people didn't like that because it felt like the game played itself, but I thought there was a lot of reward you got in being able to set up those strategies and make the game work for you. The villains I felt were a little bit, I want to say weak, because technically you were kind of fighting background villains more than anything. But it's one of those games I love looking back. I love playing. There's some things I don't like about it, but I can't say it's not a great game, and so it's got to go into A. Now this is going to be a surprise. Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings, I actually super enjoy. It's kind of like an RTS with Final Fantasy monsters and then some of the characters from Final Fantasy XII. It takes place in this like floating continent type world with this race. I'm gonna say they're like the Winglies or something. I forget what they're called, but they're basically like angel people. I really want to see those come back in some sort of way. But I don't want to say A because I know it's not a great game, but I'm going to go and put it in B. But with saying that I absolutely love it. I don't remember anything about the story, but I remember the gameplay and I remember the feeling I had when I was playing through it, and it was just a joy to play. Final Fantasy XIII. This one's a hard one, because I don't agree with people that this was a bad game. I also don't feel like it played itself the way a lot of people say. I think that there was a lot of strategy in knowing when to change your paradigms and when not to, and what to change them to as well. I also didn't have a problem with the linearity of it. I think that it could have used some ability to backtrack here and there. I think that's what really hurt it, because you were on a railroad for the entire game. And it's not like a road where you can turn around and go back if you need to. No, you are going straight until you get to Pulse. There's no turning off that. There's no going back to check stuff out. You are going straight, and you cannot stop. The characters, kind of a joy, but not a ton. I remember really liking Saz, but I don't know. I think that's because he has a Kokomo chip in his hair more than anything. But I don't like Snow. I didn't like Hope. Lightning was okay. The Cid in that game wasn't great. I'm gonna have to put it in C, with the caveat that I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people think it is. Final Fantasy XIII 2. I'm moving into it. And I think that's because I really enjoyed the way they did time travel. I think the monster collecting aspect that they had in it was good. It was really fun. You could put a hat on top of a Kate Sith. I can't say anything more than that. That is enough. It still used the paradigm system, but it felt a lot more refined because of the monster collecting aspect of it for your third party member. I liked Noelle as a character a lot more than anybody in the original one. Sarah was okay. the thing that really hurts it for me is that the game ends on a bad ending cliffhanger. And it doesn't feel like Lightning Returns picks that up. That's another one I don't have on here. I never played it because I didn't like the concept they were going with. And I wanted to see a continuation of 13-2, not a whole new game featuring Lightning. But yeah, I'm still gonna say it's an A because it's one of my more favorite modern Final Fantasies. Alright, Final Fantasy XIV. If it was 1.0, it would be trash tier. But it is now God tier. And it's probably the reason I'm so excited for Final Fantasy XVI. The turnaround from this game cannot be stated enough. They took it from nothing and made it something special. If you haven't played it, I'm gonna meme here, but there is a free trial that lets you play through the base game and the first expansion, and the first expansion is really good. The base game is just okay. It's very much world building. The villains aren't that interesting, but as you get to the end and get ready for that first expansion, it ramps up a ton and then becomes a really great story in that expansion of Heaven's Word. And then it just continues to build upon itself year after year with really good storytelling. I'm watching somebody else play through the most recent expansion, Shadowbringers, and remembering how I felt playing through that expansion and realizing how great there are all these little moments building up throughout the entire expansion for a great culmination, and then a little bit more moments, and then you have your true ending a few patches later. I am super excited for Endwalker coming out in a few months. I'm going to be doing some videos leading up to Endwalker. You'll see those on the channel as well. But it is right now one of the best Final Fantasy stories I have ever played, with some of the best characters in any Final Fantasy. And it is a shame that people don't give it a chance because it's an MMO. Alright, after that seriousness, we have Final Fantasy XV. Which I enjoyed, but I don't think it's great in the nature of the series. And so it will go on C tier. That's going to upset some people, I know, because there's some people that love 15. But for me, the only thing the game really gets right is the friendship between the four main characters. You really feel like they're friends and they have each other's backs. And I think they do a lot of good things throughout the game in building up that relationship and showing you that. Particularly the campfire scenes, where you've got all these pictures that Prompto took, you've got this meal that Ignis is cooking, everybody's sitting around talking. Sometimes when you stay in, you also get some scene between the characters. There's a great scene that you get at one end where Prompto and Ignis talk to each other, and Prompto just opens up about how he feels kind of inadequate amongst the other guys on the trip. But other than that, the game just lacking something. And as fun as Arden is as a villain, he's no Emmett Silk from 14. He's no Sephiroth. He's no Kefka. Well, he's no Golbez from 4. He's fun and interesting, but there's something missing, and that's the entire game. And I think it's because it fell through so many hands, went through some development hell. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in C tier. Final Fantasy Tactics. This is the last God tier. I'm already looking at your other games, and I will tell you, this is the last God tier. It is the game that made me fall in love with tactical role-playing games. which led me on to the first Vandal Hearts. It's a high political intrigue, drama-focused story, with this kind of shadow war being fought in the background of a larger holy war going on. And it's one of the best uses of the job system from 3 and 5, with some really great characters that you meet along the way, and some interesting new jobs to take on as well. It's a game I really want to do another playthrough sometime if I can find a good release of it. I think I might have the PSP version purchased, so I might do that at some point, but it's going to be a little ways down the road. But it is such a good tactical role-playing game that is just, it feels perfect in so many ways. There's only a handful of faults in my eyes. One of that is because you can kind of screw yourself into a fight that you can't win, and you have to restart the whole game. But that, other than that, it is one of my favorite Final Fantasies, and so it has to go in God. Tactics Advance. This one has a lot of the same stuff as Tactics from a battle standpoint, except for they added judges, which now impose rules on you in certain battles, and races of characters that you recruit, who then they're limited to what jobs they can do based upon their race. On top of that, the story's a little bit weird because you start off in the real world, and one of the characters opens up a magical book about Final Fantasy. Everybody gets sucked into a Final Fantasy world, so it's kind of an isekai, I guess. It's fun to play. Story's nothing to technically write home from what I can remember, but I know some people really love the story at the same time. I'm gonna throw it in B. If the story hooked me more, it would be up in A, I think. But yeah. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. The little Super Nintendo RPG that couldn't. If you don't know the story, Square Enix wanted to create a introductory role-playing game for the West so we could learn how to play role-playing games. Looking back, it's still a lot of fun. It's got some really good music. The monster designs are actually really great. Just the story is really bland, and combat is, if I remember right, super easy. So I'm gonna throw it into C, but I think there's some positives there that they could really do something. And so I kind of want to see some of the stuff brought back to see where we fall. And finally, World of Final Fantasy. This is a game that I borrowed from my brother about a year after it was actually released. I played it a few months before 15. I loved it, but I know a lot of people don't like the humor in it. I'm gonna put it in B tier. It's a great little monster collecting, like Pokemon style game. It's got a unique battle system where you have to stack everybody up, and then that gives you more HP because you combine all your HPs together, and you combine all your skills together. The game is really silly, some really juvenile humor, and a convoluted kind of storyline. But what monster collecting game doesn't have a convoluted storyline? It's great seeing all these Final Fantasy characters kind of interact together. The one thing I wish they would do, and I'm surprised they still haven't, is the characters in this game, the Final Fantasy characters, are these little chibi, almost Funko Pop type characters. I don't know why they haven't released a series of those. With as popular as Funko Pops are, those things would sell like hotcakes. And I don't know why Squared hasn't done that. I don't know. I guess I can dream. But that is my Final Fantasy tier list of the games that I've played. I see I didn't really put anything below, but I don't think there's been like a trash Final Fantasy that I have played. Just some ones that were a little bit subpar. But I'm gonna say it again. If you haven't played 14, go play 14. Like I said, it is one of the best stories with some of the best characters in the Final Fantasy series. You need to go play it. I'm not lying. Alright, my last plug of that for the video. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments below. Or give a subscription here. I'm going to be doing some more unique videos once a month. You'll be seeing those come up on the channel. And then every once in a while, I'll do a long Let's Play. I think my goal is I'm going to record the entire Let's Play and get all the episodes prepared, and then they will go up 2 or 3 videos a week until I get through the series. That'll be better than me trying to feel like I'm forced to get a new episode prepared as it's coming up to be due. I'll just create a big backlog and they'll go up, and then we'll have these monthly videos that will kind of hold us over in between. If you otherwise want to get a hold of me or know what I'm doing, there's links in the description below to my Twitch channel where I'll stream on occasion. Probably most likely Monday nights. That might shift to Thursday nights. We'll see how everything goes. And links to my social media, and a link to the Discord channel if you want to be part of the daily community that we have going on. But with that said, we're going to call this video over, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.